Thank you. What an amazing morning. This hall is full with energy, enthusiasm, warmth, emotions, everything. But I am trying to imagine whether these things will happen after 20 or 30 years, or 50 years. When Industry 4.0 or Industry 5.0 will be on its full pace. Perhaps we don't need these congregations and these situations in the age of augmented reality, virtual reality, artificial intelligence, we just mentioned. Perhaps we will be having a small chip somewhere in our body fixed, and we think of IIM alumni, and you will be connected with perhaps thousands of alumni all across the world. Maybe you will think about Kailash Satyarthi, and Kailash Satyarthi will appear in front of your virtual reality, and you can listen to him. You can think Nobel acceptance speech, it would be there. And you can feel that you are in the midst of Nobel acceptance ceremony. So things like that are bound to happen. But those who are going to live 20, 30 years, perhaps they are not going to die for another 50 years. So all the 150-year-old, 130-year-old would be talking among themselves. But I suspect that there would be some children to play with. I suspect that there would be the real human relationship living in this automation and the age of robotic life. When I was coming here, number of students, where are young friends sitting? All the students, high secondary students, I could not see there. Oh, you are sitting there? Yeah, and also in that corner. And they were a bit shy, greeting me. And our photographer friend trying to encourage them, smile, don't be nervous. A story comes to my mind when somebody meets a Nobel laureate. And people think that Nobel laureates are very special people with some charisma, with outstanding life and work and so on. One day there was a journalist driving inside countryside in a remote area. And he noticed that there was a man standing in an open field under the sky, under the hot sun. So that made him curious. And he stopped his car and went to this guy and asked, "Sir, what are you doing here?" He said, "Don't disturb me, I am doing very important work." He asked, "What are you doing, sir? Just wait." So after 10, 15 minutes, this journalist again went to him and asked, "Sir, can you tell me what important work you're doing here?" He said, "In my childhood, I read something. So I'm waiting for a Nobel Prize." And the journalist looked here and there. There was no laboratory, no machine, no books, nothing. This man was like a peasant or a farmer. He said, "How come you can get the Nobel Prize?" He said, "I read those who are outstanding in their field, they can be the Nobel laureate. So look at me, I'm outstanding in my field, and one day I can win the Nobel Prize. So don't be shy, don't be nervous when you meet me, my dear young friends. And while taking the photos, let me tell you another thing, that I had to wait for 50 years to get a photo with a Nobel laureate, and that was His Holiness Dalai Lama. Both of us were sharing dyes in Germany, but I had a dream that one day I will have a picture with a Nobel laureate and put everywhere in my home. So when the Dalai Lama came, there was a photographer, it was in Germany, in Berlin, after the reunification of Germany. The photographer came and went, just one photographer. And those days, we didn't have these kind of smartphone equipped with the modern cameras. So I was looking at the photographer, but he left. And Dalai Lama was sitting beside me and holding my hand. And he asked, "Whom are you looking for, young man?" I could not say that I'm looking for cameraman, not. So I could not take a photo. So the day when my Nobel Prize was announced, on 10th of October 2014, I remembered my dream. So I immediately rushed to my washroom, stood in front of the mirror, and took at least a dozen or more selfies. So I had the first photo with a Nobel laureate, Peace Laureate, my own selfie. But when we are talking of Life 4.0 today, I will begin with my own life, 4.1.0, 2.0, 3.0, and now perhaps 4.0. So my parents wanted to make me engineer because I was scoring perhaps good marks in mathematics and science. So it was their dream. I studied electrical engineering. I did my specialization later on in high voltage transformer designs because it was much required those days when the BHEL, at that time it was called HEL, Heavy Electricals Limited, was expanding and looking for the high voltage transformation and transmission, especially rural electrification. So I studied and I taught in the university for about a year and a half. That was my Kailash 1.0. But I could not stick to 1.0 because I was passionate about the issues of children. Right from the day one of my schooling when I saw a cobbler boy outside my school gate. And he was looking at our feet. Perhaps we could give him some job of shoe shining. But my friends and I were wearing new shoes. His empty, miserable eyes entered with me in my classroom, and I asked this to my teacher and later on my parents and friends, that why this child does not sit with the rest of us in the classroom. And everybody tried to convince me that, look, these are poor children, they have to help the families. I was not convinced. One day I asked my mother, she said the same thing. So when I was coming back from my school, I was already very much disappointed, disturbed, rather angry that why he sits every morning in the open sky and shines shoes for the children like me. So I stopped and I asked him and his father, who was also sitting alongside. The boy was shy. Father replied, "Babuji, मैंने कभी सोचा नहीं." Sir, I never thought about it. My grandfather, my father, and I started this work since we were children. And so is my son, he said. I could not understand. Then he stood up with his folded hands. Those who know, most of you know about the caste hierarchy in India, and 50 years ago it was much more deeper and intense, even today. So he said, बाबूजी, स्कूल जाने के लिए तो आप लोग हैं, हम तो मजदूरी करने के लिए पैदा हुए हैं. You guys are born to go to school, but we are born to work, he said. And this was unacceptable for me. That was the first trigger. That was the first spark in my life. I didn't know much about the issue, but it has given me a different perspective of life. And later on, I can explain that this was the spark of compassion. Compassion is not sympathy, it's not empathy either. These two outer circles of sympathy and empathy are there, but compassion is much more deeper. It's a feeling for the suffering of others as it is your own suffering, with a desire and drive to change that situation of suffering is compassion. It is not simply being sympathetic or feeling the suffering of others, but you have a drive. You cannot wait to solve that suffering or pain of others. We are all born with this God gift of compassion. All religions in the world were born out of compassion. And interestingly, all revolutions in the world ignited out of this spark of compassion. When somebody has felt the suffering of others as his or her own suffering, the religions were born. Revolutions were born. So with that, my second phase began when I decided to give up my career and started a magazine to educate and sensitize the people about child slavery, child labor. And these were the non-issues in India and across the world. People thought that slavery has been abolished after the enactment of the slavery laws and so on, anti-slavery laws. India did not have its own law against child labor. The law was enacted only in 1986. UN Convention on the Rights of the Child was adopted by the General Assembly in 1989. But I'm talking about 70s and early 80s. So it was very hard. So I started a magazine to sensitize the people. One day, a desperate father knocked my door, whose daughter was born and grew up in slavery and about to be sold to a brothel. This man, Vasal Khan, and his wife were lured away just after their marriage with false promises to work at a brick kiln. And when they saw that their 15-year-old daughter could have been sold to a brothel, the agents were coming and negotiating the price. Man ran away in the middle of the night. For 17 years, they were confined to workplace. He was knocking every possible door in Punjab, in Chandigarh. Somehow, he met a gentleman who was the subscriber of my magazine. So this man told that, go to Kailash, he can help you publish your story. When I was talking to Vasal Khan and writing his story, I was 26. I felt that if she was my sister, if Savo was my daughter, what would I do? I would not simply write and wait for some action taken by the government. I would uphold the whole world upside down and could do every possible thing, I thought. I said, Vasal, I'll go with you. I collected some friends. My wife, Sumedha, was always a great partner in my journey. I requested her to give her wedding ornaments so that we can mortgage our cell, to organize logistics to go to free this family and many more families. We went there. We were beaten up. Vasal was caught. We could not free that girl and rest of the children. I had to come with empty hand, barefoot, torn clothes. But I did not give up. I never believed in giving up. If I'm born, if you are born, if everybody is born with purpose, born with some divinity, born with something special. In most of our cases, we do not find our purpose of life. We find very small purpose, very small purpose. If you are the children of God, how can you live with a small purpose to earn $1 billion or $10 billion? This is a small purpose. The divinity does not teach us just to dream to become a teacher or a professor or whatever. We can do much better for the world by being a good human being. If we can help others, then we will carry the message of God. So I came back empty hands, but not with empty heart. I went to a friend of mine who helped me to take me to the court. So with the help of High Court Delhi, using the old British legal regime of habeas corpus, we were able to free not only this family, but 36 other children, men and women. And when I was bringing them back from the High Court in Delhi to my small one-room, half-room office, these children were jumping on the streets, and I could feel the glimpse of God in the smile of freedom on the faces of those children. I could feel the glimpse of God in the tears rolling down on the cheeks of their mothers. This was the moment of truth for me. I could witness the God. I don't know how many saints and faith leaders have ever experienced the God this way, but freeing Sabo and freeing 88,000 children from slavery and holding them back to their mothers who lost all the hope that they can ever hug their children, I have experienced God at least 88,000 times in my life. So that was the second Life 2.0. When I started, it began Life 3.0 because 2.0 was my journalism to educate and sensitize the people. So 3.0 was the life of activism, and suddenly, as I said, that I got a message that the Nobel Peace Prize is being conferred upon me. So 4.0 began. But I was saying yesterday during the lunch, and I told on the very first day to the international media when they said that now this new life of celebrity stardom begins once you become a Nobel Peace Laureate. I said, no. My 4.0 is a comma in my life. It can never be a full stop. The full stop will come only when every child is free to be a child. When every child is free to cry and laugh, when every child is free to jump and touch the sky, when every child is in school, not in workplaces, not in brothels. Not only in India, but on this planet, every child is a child. And I'm trying to do so. Dear friends, in all these 4 stages, my drive was compassion. Unfortunately, when we are living in this new world of connect, cyber connect, internet connect, we are living in the high-speed internet. Even I keep on buying the newest, the fastest gadgets, fastest cell phones, because I love to live in that. I keep on asking my office that is the highest speed internet in my room, or we can get a better speed internet. So that has gone so much deep to my mind. We have conquered Mars. Every Indian was celebrating a few weeks ago when the Chandrayaan-2 mission began. We are able to take the closest photos from Pluto. We have reached out through our modern technology to every place in the world so fast. But when I'm standing here, I'm sad to say that we have not reached out yet to hundreds of millions of people, hundreds of millions of our children. We live in a world where children are sold and bought like animals, and sometimes in lesser price than the animals. We live in a world where 152 million children today are working, toiling at the cost of their childhood and freedom and education, creating wealth for others. We are living in a world where 428 million children are living in multi-dimensional poverty, acute poverty, who are below the age of 10 years. 10 years and younger children are living in acute poverty. We live in a world where 62 million children have never been to school. They have never seen a school gate or a teacher. And another 200 million were forced to leave school because they could not complete even the primary classes. So 262 million children have to be in schools, but they are not. Millions of young children are being trafficked, and that has become a $150 billion illicit industry in the world, human trafficking. And the children are the worst sufferers. Today, when we are sitting here and talking about all these new things in the world, new ideas, 50 million children must be navigating a safer place to stay tonight and food this afternoon. These 50 million children are not sinners. They are not culprits. They are not responsible for global warming. They are not responsible for the violence and wars in the world. They are living in refugee crisis or displaced due to climate change. I strongly feel that if one single child is in danger, the entire humanity is in danger. If one single child is enslaved, we cannot call ourselves free. Our minds are not free. If one single girl is sold for 2,000 rupees, 3,000 rupees, 5,000 rupees at the age of 10 or 11 for prostitution, in India or in somewhere in the world, we have to look into the mirrors and see that what kind of businesses we are doing in the world. Dear friends, if you invest $1 single on education for a child today, there is World Bank and UNESCO's joint report, that the return would be $15 in next 20 years. If you invest one single dollar on eradication of child labor, the return would be 7 times in next 20 years. So investment on children is not only the investment for the future, it is an investment for present also. And that requires compassionate connect with the children. We have to reach out to those children with compassion. Many of you are leaders in technology and information technology in particular. Many of you run the big businesses, big industry corporations in internet and cyber. But when these children are trafficked, we don't have adequate enough advanced technology to track the trafficking of children. In India, recently, we have been successful in introducing, with the help of High Court of Delhi, introducing this very simple technique of facial recognition. 120,000 children who were missing or who were stolen from their places, they were living in shelter homes run by the governments and some private institutions, 120,000, few months ago. They are still living there, almost all of them. 40 to 45,000 children go missing every year in India. Can technology not be helpful? So we went to the court, we went to the government and requested that the photos of all these children are available. Those who were missing from their homes and those who were staying in the shelter homes. Why can't the simple technique of facial recognition help? It took about a year to convince the court, because there were a lot of large proceedings, lengthy proceedings. Finally, within a week, more than 7,000 children were reunited to their families once this technique has been. And the number has grown in few months, 11,000, more than 11,000. So dear friends, small things can be helpful. I have brought this struggle to this stage. I'm not going to stop. I'm also working on a new area, and that is the online child sexual abuse. You can call it digital abuses, as well as the online trafficking. More than 50,000 perpetrators and hungry for child sex are there online today. Why can't the technology help in just catching them, stopping them, punishing them? It's very much possible, but the priorities have to be changed. We have to think through the eyes of compassion. So many things are possible in the world using the technology. Those days are gone when everything was depending on the government. I used to go to United Nations General Assemblies, but we were not allowed to make any intervention inside. In the UNESCO meetings, in ILO meetings, in the World Bank meetings, we had to sit at least a kilometer away from there 20 years ago. Neither the corporate sector was the part of those negotiations or deliberations in the beginning. We have to sit in the fringes, but those days are gone. Now, in all major decisions, and the latest one was the Sustainable Development Goals, where not only the governments, but the corporations and civil society organizations were not only invited, but we played very important role. So there are three major stakeholders: state, corporate, and civil society. We have to learn how to trust each other. We have to learn how to cooperate with each other. We have to learn that how to learn from each other and solve these problems. The social problems through technological solutions. The social and cultural and other problems through corporate solutions is very much possible. Dear friends, you can make a difference. I know that you have already made a difference. You have changed the image of India. People can say that they were saints and sadhus, yogis. Of course, they made their contribution. Of course, the politicians made their contribution. But I can, as an engineer who has been traveling across the world for the last so many years, I could see the difference, and the credit goes to the young technocrat, young managers like you and you and you. You have not only brought wealth to the world, the wealth of knowledge, the wealth of your skills, wealth of your achievements, but more importantly, the perception has changed about India because of young professionals like you and young entrepreneurs. I conclude calling you to think of business with compassion. I am working to globalize compassion. We have globalized technologies, we have globalized markets, we have globalized economies, knowledge, internet, and we have seen the results, good and bad both. But a gift which has been given by God to us, the gift of compassion, you need not to borrow compassion from others. This is the time to globalize compassion. If we have to save people, humanity, if we have to save planet, if we have to think of sustainability in prosperity, production, if we have to restore peace in the world where people can live fearlessly, happily, if we have to protect all these 4 P's, people, planet, prosperity, and peace, then we have to go back inside ourselves and we have to connect each other through compassion. In this way, we can save the world. When I was receiving the Nobel Peace Prize, I lost my speaking notes on the dais when I was giving my acceptance speech, and whole hall was nervous, king, queen, prime minister. And that was live on CNN, that was live on BBC, live on most of the televisions in the world. And as they say, that Nobel Peace Acceptance speech is the 2nd largest watched episode. You know which is the first one? The largest one? Not cricket. Unfortunately, we are all fond of cricket, the Indians, but it was the FIFA Football World Cup final. That was the largest watched TV show. And the second one is the Nobel Peace Acceptance speech. So I lost my papers, and suddenly a story came to my mind which I read in my childhood. There was a heavy fire broken out in jungle. All animals were rushing for a safer place, including King Lion. And Lion noticed that there was a tiny hummingbird flying straight towards the flames. He shouted, "What are you doing, committing suicide?" The bird said, "No, sir, I am going to extinguish this fire. मैं आग बुझाने के लिए जा रही हूँ." Surprisingly, he asked, "How come?" And she replied, "Sir, look at my beak. I am carrying a drop of water. I am doing my bit. I am doing my bit," she said. I said, this story, and I said, this is my life. This was my life 1.0. This was my life 2.0. This is my life 3.0, and this is my life 4.0. We are all born with this tiny hummingbird. We all have this tiny hummingbird inside each one of you. But we keep on repressing her, we keep on suppressing her when the bird wanted to help others, wanted to speak out truth, justice, righteousness. We say that we have to be a little bit matured, little bit diplomat, little bit clever, keep on suppressing and being artificial. Dear sisters, dear brothers, dear friends, my dear children, I am here to remind you that there is a tiny hummingbird inside each one of you. I am here just to awaken your hummingbird and tell you that don't stop it. Globalize compassion through that. Globalize compassion. March with me. I am going to globalize compassion. I am going to put an end together with so many friends and colleagues across the world to end child labor, child slavery, child trafficking. I am trying to do my bit. You can join doing your bit in making exploitation and abuses of children a history, so that your children will read only in the books that there was an evil, there was a crime called child slavery. And they will also be proud that our parents, our grandparents had made some contribution in ending this menace from the face of humankind. Thank you so much. Thank you. 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 Thank you.
Thank you, Kailashji, for that very, very inspiring journey, sharing of your journey. A lot of questions. May I request you to please have a seat? Yes. Yeah. So there are a lot of questions from the audience, and for those of you who want to ask but don't know how to do it, please scan the QR codes that are there on your desk, on your tables, or go to pigeonhole.at. So Kailashji, number of questions, and using technology, we allow people to rate those questions. One of the questions, and I think that's also your area of interest, is compassion without passion. Is it even possible? And what do you think of those who make a donation but probably do it to kind of take the things off their heart?
When we talk of compassion, passion is included in it. But passion alone would not make this world a better place. In some cases it is possible when it is compassion. In some cases it is possible when there is a purpose, when there is a good strategy to do something good for the society. But as I said, that compassion has all the ingredient in itself. It has passion definitely to solve the suffering of others, to solve the pain of others as it is your own pain. But to begin with, you have to feel the feeling of others. And feel the feeling of others makes you much purer, more satisfied. When you do business with compassion, for example, and help others, it is not charity. Charity is good. It's not philanthropy. It is more than that, because then you don't feel, when you do the charity, you feel that your hand is upper, and the person who is receiving the donation or support from you is a paranoid or sometimes inferior to someone who is superior, the donor. But when you shake hand in compassion, then you build a different kind of relationship with the humanity. So satisfaction, happiness, gratitude, kindness, all these factors come along with compassion. So compassionate behavior will bring all those joy. The doctors who treat their patients with compassion, they are much more, reverent. They are much more respected and loved one by other people. Similarly, you can find some nurses with compassion, more compassionate nurses. in comparison to some
Sure,
others
yeah.
who are doing this profession. So one can do the profession with compassion. Whatever you do, politics with compassion, as I said, and business with compassion, as I said, that is possible. It will help, it will give more satisfaction and safety to your customers, to your stakeholders, to your shareholders, to your boardroom managers and so on, if the boss does business with compassion.
Sure. So how do you instill compassion in kids so that when they grow up, they become compassionate citizens?
I would say that it would look a little bit awkward to all of you, that I sometimes say that the society, the world had many mistakes, but the biggest mistake is to teach our children. What we teach our children? We teach our minds, our complacencies, our divides, our arrogance, our desires, our lust, and we keep on transferring to children. I tell you that children are not responsible for any war, but they are the worst sufferers. No child has ever invented the idea of passport, for example, or the visa. Children have never invented this idea. No child has put the borders between India and Pakistan, or say Mexico and USA, which we see every day, that how the respected president is treating with the children and separating them away from their parents. These children have never been responsible for creating those borders between Haiti and USA, but they are worse sufferers. So think for a while that instead of teaching these things, Hindus, Muslims, Christians, teaching them, giving them fake identities, dividing humanity by giving them identities of being the high caste or low caste Hindus and so on, we should sit with the children and learn from them. Don't teach our children, learn simplicity, learn truthfulness, learn compassion, learn righteousness, learn frankness, learn the quest for more learning, new things from children. So instead of teaching our children compassion, we should learn compassion from our children. They are already the source of compassion. We keep on putting layers on their minds through our teaching, and they lose the sight on compassion. I think we should learn the purity of smile and purity of childhood. If you are really transparent in your life, you're really doing good and forgiving others in your life, it is not because you are a very learned person. It is because a child still resides inside you. So my humble request is, don't let that child die. Nurse that child inside first. You will learn compassion. Sit with the children and be with the children.
Thank you, Kailash ji. Although there have been a lot of questions,
Yes.
but I think we are now kind of at the end of the session. So one last question. How did you feel when you received the Nobel Prize?
I never believed, actually. When the Nobel Peace Prize was announced, I was not aware that day the Nobel Peace Prize is announced. So a journalist, Indian journalist from NDTV called me up, and he was so excited. He said, Kailash ji, Nobel Prize, Kailash ji, Nobel Prize. He could not complete his full sentence out of joy or excitement. He started crying, and I thought that something has gone wrong with the Nobel laureate. And since India did not have any Nobel laureate living now, and India has no Desi Indian-born Nobel Peace Laureate in the history, so I could not imagine. So I started Googling. I was sitting in my office and I started Googling Nobel Peace Prize 2014, thinking that somebody might have got the Nobel Prize and he's asking for some comment from me. So it was not appearing, but it was a matter of few seconds. My name started blinking on it, on the screen, Kailash Satyarthi. And I thought, oh God, how could it happen? But it happened. It is a reality. But I tell you, and I will finish, the moment I got the Nobel Prize, the announcement, I felt that this is the first ever most serious recognition to the last child of human society. This way, the Nobel Committee has given voice to the most voiceless millions on the earth. This way, they have given the face to invisible millions, and they are my children, they're your children. I started thinking like that, and my resolution has gone even deeper, and I decided that I will have to do more with much more moral accountability. You can find several accountability frameworks in businesses, in the governance, and so on and so forth. But the most effective, the most powerful is the moral accountability. When we feel morally accountable to ourselves, what we do, then nothing could match. No other accountability system or mechanism can match with the moral accountability to grow you inside from inside and feel you happy and satisfied. So I thought that this Nobel Prize, because it was the first time this thing happening, and I met the Prime Minister, of course, Prime Minister invited, and the President invited, President of India. So President of India, that time, Pranab Mukherjee, he was almost in tears. He was so moved. And he said one thing, that Kailash ji, perhaps you don't know that in this land of 1.3 billion people, we don't have one single Nobel medal. Not just peace, but any other medal. The first medal was brought by Rabindranath Tagore ji, Gurudev, but it was stolen. Then rest of the people who got the Nobel Prize, they were not Indian citizens except Mother Teresa. So Mother Teresa's medal was taken to some place, I can't recall, through her relatives or church. So this was the first time when the peace medal was touching Indian land. So an idea came to my mind that this should not belong to Kailash Satyarthi alone, this should belong to every Indian. So what should I do? I wrote a letter to him that, Mr. President, I wanted to give it away to my nation. Every Indian should have that Nobel credibility and the medal. And he called me back, he invited me again, and he said, Kailash ji, what are you talking about? The letter has been written by you or someone else? I said, this is my handwritten letter. He said, it never happened in the world. Nobody has ever given it away to the nation. It's the first time in the history, and he checked it. He is a thorough, learned person. And I said, no, I'm going to do it. If you are not going to accept it, I'm going to leave it at Rajghat, Mahatma Gandhi's memorial. So he did not agree, but I thought that I will put it to Rajghat. So when I was bringing the medal in December, I got a call and a letter from the president, basically a call and letter from his office. And they said that they have changed the protocol because it never happened anywhere in the world, so they have to rewrite a protocol so that they can receive the Nobel Peace Medal or Nobel Medal. So I went to the President House, Rashtrapati Bhavan, and handed over to him. He could not speak one word. He was so moved. It never happened, and that was the creation of a history. So I said, Rashtrapati ji, I remember a couplet of Kabir Das, मेरा मुझ में कछु नहीं, जो कछु है सब तोर, और तेरा तुझको सौंपते क्या लागत है मोर. This was for India, this was for any Indian who is living in India and the Indians who are living abroad. You are born in India, I was also born in India. So the medal is lying in the President House Museum. I cannot touch, my children cannot touch, but one can see in the museum of Rashtrapati Bhavan.
That's very inspiring, Kailash ji. Thank you very much for your insights, and it was a pleasure to be with you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.